I was told to count the stars. I guess I'm gonna have to wait till dark. That's what we're talking about today as we continue our sermon series called The Party. We're looking at how we live in God's abundance, how He's created all this abundance all around us. And I love the image of a party because the whole idea is that you get there and there's just chips everywhere. There's enough to eat. No one has to worry about going hungry when there is a party. I mean, I remember I've been to weddings and they've just had so much food and it's just all delicious. And you just look like, oh, this is incredible. Or someone has a 4th of July party and it's just an incredible spread of baked beans and hot dogs and hamburgers and potato salad and all these, all wonderful. And I think it really helps us to see God's kingdom as a party. But He has given us in His kingdom, in the creation, abundance all around us. And He is inviting us into the party that He has made for us, that He is a generous host. And He provides so much abundance for both you and I. But there's a problem. We live in a world and we don't always see the party that is going on around us. We don't see the abundance, that amazing party that God has providing for us. Instead, we only see scarcity. We only see how we don't have enough. Have you ever wondered why this is? Where did this idea come from that we don't have enough? Well, the Bible gives us a picture of what actually happened. Right after the voice of God said, "Let there be light." And right after the voice of God created all the things that creep and move and swim and have their being on the grounds and all the shrubberies pulling up and all that stuff. After all of that and after He created the man, Adam, and Adam helped him name all the different creatures in there. And after he created the helper for the man out of the side of him so that they would always be joined together. God's creation, Adam and Eve, they're wandering around in the garden, in the party of God, enjoying all the things that God gives them. And then they heard a voice, but it wasn't the voice that said, "Separate the waters from above, the waters below." It was a different voice. In the Bible, it says the voice of a serpent. And the serpent, it says, was extra crafty. And he's like, he said to the woman, did God actually say that you shouldn't eat from any of the trees in the garden? And remember, God had said that they could eat of any of the trees of the garden. But the evil voice says, is God holding out on you? Did He really say you can't eat of any tree? I don't know. That could be the best one over there. And the woman acknowledges it. In fact, she corrects the serpent and she says, this is Genesis chapter 3, verse 2. And we may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said, "You shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden, neither shall you touch it, lest you die." So you can eat all of them except for the one. You can eat all of this abundance except for that one. But that crafty voice continues, "You will not surely die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. And she also gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both were opened, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths. And this crafty voice continues, God is holding out on you. Don't you want to be like God? Don't you need more and more? He is holding stuff against you. So they take. And they begin to put themselves first. And all of a sudden, their eyes are open to what they've done. And they realize that their relationship with the generous host that has brought them into the party of the kingdom is suddenly broken. And they probably feel shame for the first time, feeling like they're naked, feeling suddenly as if they're alone. And we see that the host is actually in the garden looking for them. That voice of creation is looking for them, but they run and hide. They are now taking for themselves. Yeah, this story is so odd, but it also sounds really familiar. It sounds odd, just like if we were at a party and we're talking to some people, having a good time, maybe drinking some of the punch, and we look over and there's like Betty that's over there and she's shoveling all of the chicken wings into her purse. And we're like, what are you doing, Betty? And we look around to the other side and there's Gary over there and he's got this huge vat of ranch dressing in his hands and he begins to pour that into his cargo shorts pocket. You're like, Gary, what are you doing, Gary? You're just making a mess all over the place, right? It's odd. And that voice saying that is odd, but it sounds familiar too. Because we don't have to look very far before we see multi-million-dollar homes with someone homeless just sitting right outside. You know, we don't have to look too far before we see ourselves driving in tens of $1,000 cars around to all the places we go, passing by people who have nothing and are just trying to get scraps on the side of the streets, right? I mean, we don't have to look too far. I mean, we're in an election season right now. And we always hear these voices like serpents coming out that says, if you vote for that guy, he's going to take your Social Security away. If you vote for him, you know, we're going to fall into another recession. If you vote for him, we might not have any retirement left. We're just not going to have enough, right? It sounds familiar, right? I imagine you may have looked around at Thanksgivings in the past and have said, as you looked at your family and you thought about where you were when you were their age, and you realized that they have so much less wealth than you did at that time, and how they are just suffocated in debt, and you worry about them, saying, are they going to have enough? And it sounds familiar when we look out at our graduating seminary students, and some of them are coming out of seminary, new pastors with $100,000 in student loans. And you look around and you hear as people are being turned away from places where they could get canned food because they just run out. Are they going to have enough? So where do you hear that voice of the evil one whispering in your ear that you just don't have enough? I think we all kind of hear it. We all can hear it a lot of times in a lot of different places. And how do you respond to the voice? Because in our sin, I think we often become that guy who's acting a fool at the party, who is just taking the giant thing of ranch dressing and just dumping it into his cargo pocket, saying, there may not be enough ranch dressing. I love my ranch dressing. I gotta have it. You know, acting like there's never going to be enough. And sometimes people look at us like, oh my goodness. You know, the evil one does this. This evil side of us does this, that we think that there's not going to be enough. And it just causes us to be selfish and to only think of ourselves. And here it's important to put our biblical glasses on, because remember the story of Adam and Eve and how they have fallen away from God. And we have the very next story, that's like Genesis chapter 3. Here's Genesis chapter 4, and it's about Cain and Abel, the first children of the creation. Congratulations, Adam and Eve. You did what you were supposed to. You're to be fruitful and multiply. Hey, that's great. So Cain is the older one, and he works out in the fields. And Abel is a shepherd. He works with all the animals and all that. And they both come to the Lord and they bring offerings to him. But here's where the story gets weird. God shows favor on Abel's sacrifice. It's an odd part of the story, and I think many people look at it and wonder, and I think it actually has to do with what we're talking about today. Because we have to look at Cain's response. Because Cain grows angry. And you can almost hear what his inner monologue. He's like, why did the Lord pick Abel over my sacrifice? Was mine just simply not good enough? Did I do something wrong? Why in the world did he choose that? Why would he love my brother more than he loves me? And we can start hearing that voice that sounds like a serpent, sounds like a snake, that the voice of not the creator, right? Kind of whispering in his ear, saying, Cain, you don't have enough. And then that voice of the creation comes to Cain, and he could tell the anger on his heart, and he basically says, man, you gotta calm down here. Have a generous heart and be content with what you have, because sin, that old voice, is crouching at your door and it's going to pounce on you. And here we have, right after Adam and Eve, Genesis chapter 4 here, we have our first murder. A murder where Cain takes his brother Abel out to the fields and kills him there. Cain is jealous of his brother because he thinks that he just simply doesn't have enough. And then the party seems to almost get even worse. I mean, you wouldn't think so, because after there's like a murder at the party, it's almost like Clue come to life, right? Like, oh my goodness, we had this nice dinner party, and then someone ends up killing someone else. That's not good. We got to start this party over. We got to start who hasn't put chicken wings in their pockets or has taken some ranch home? Like, who hasn't done that? Noah, yeah, Noah, you haven't done that. Let's start the party over with you. We'll kick everybody out and we'll have a great party starting with you, and you can invite your offspring after there. But that doesn't even work. After the ark debacle and everything like that, something happens with Noah that almost goes unmentioned how bad it is, and it shows that Noah's no better than any of us else. And then the people after Noah, they build a tower saying that we want to control everything. We don't want to be beholden to God. We want to be at the same level as him. We want to be God's ourselves. I mean, the Tower of Babel is almost like they want to just cram as much chicken wings into their pockets as they could, saying that, man, if we can just get enough and get enough, they almost glorify the fact that they want to get more and more power. It's almost like they worship the idea of the power for themselves, getting more and more and more, and almost making that out to be their God. So where is the hope? Where is this generous host that created all of this? What is he going to do? Well, long story short, is that he chooses a guy and gives a promise to him. Oh, here we go again. Just like Abel, God just chooses one guy. It can't go well from here. Yeah, I hear you. But this one is different. You see this Abraham that God speaks to, that his voice goes out to, that Abraham, who's called Abram at this point, it doesn't say that just he is going to be blessed. Not just him, but through him and all of his offspring, the entire world would be blessed. No, it's not even the entire world. The entire creation would be blessed. Because that voice of the Creator pulls Abram aside one night and says, look at the stars, Abram. Can you count them? And I love this story so much because it's incredibly, I love that question. It's like, can you count them? Because he's talking about the abundance of God's blessings, the abundance of what God is giving them, right? It's God's pattern of generosity. He says, look at the stars in the sky. Your offspring is going to be like them. Are you even able to count them? Like, I love this story because I had like an incredible time with the stars when I went with Coley's family once to the Bahamas, and we went to one of the outlying islands. I remember the first night we were there, we went up to the deck and looked out and looked at the stars, and I was blown away because you could see everything, right? Because now when we look up at the stars in the sky, you know, we can look up, and if God came to us, look at the stars, can you count them? And you look up like, yeah, like 20. There they are, right? Like 20. Because we're at such a deficit, that's all we can see. But when I was in the Bahamas, I looked up and I was blown away. The first thing out of my mouth was, you can see that? That's real? That's real? Like, because I always thought it was fake. The fact that you could see the colors in the galaxy and you could see all the stars as we're looking through the Milky Way galaxy, I was just blown away by the stars of the night sky. And I could understand that they would look at that and it's like, can you count the stars, Abram? You can't, can you? Like, there's just so many, but the story gets so much better than that. Because we remember back in the 90s, NASA had this fancy new space telescope called Hubble, right? And they did the project called Deep Field. And what they did is they took the Hubble Space Telescope and they pointed it at a dark pinprick in the sky. And when I say pinprick, I mean pinprick. And they looked at it where they knew there was nothing. It was just darkness in that pinprick. And they held the shutter open for 10 days. And they waited that 10 days. And after 10 days, they got the image back. And the image they got back wasn't one of darkness in that impossibly small pinprick in the night sky. And they didn't get just back, oh, stars that we haven't seen before. No, what they got back, they were able to count, was 600 whole galaxies filled with stars and worlds that we would never be able to count. Just in the pinprick of a sky is a testimony to the generosity and the abundance that God has put in the creation. So can you count them, Abram? And in that moment, Abram trusted in God's abundance. He trusted in God's generosity, and it says that it was counted to Abram as righteousness. I mean, so much ink has been spilled over the fact that that moment when Abram couldn't count the stars, he was credited to him as righteousness. But we know Abraham's family. We know Abraham, like, he wasn't perfect, but he believed it. He believed it because he couldn't count the stars. Through that imperfect family, through that imperfect offspring, came a perfect Messiah that would bring us all back to God, who would show us the generosity of the Father once again. When that Messiah would die so that we would live, and he rose so that we would never be lost. So there are voices all in our heads, and one is telling us to hoard, to take more for ourselves, to take those chicken wings and fill our purse with them, or take that big bowl of ranch dressing and just dump it into our cargo pockets. Don't do that, don't do that. It just ends up making a bigger mess in the end. But the other voice simply wants us to look up and look up at the stars and count them if we can. And if we have problems counting all of them, then maybe we'll realize that there is enough. So come on in. Come on into the party of God, that he has created this whole place with abundance for us all. That we don't have to live in that scarcity mentality. Come on into the party. Don't wait out there anymore. Just come on in. God loves you. And we'll see you next time.